This is fine. Now, this video is going to be a two-parter, with the first being the base game Stronghold, and the latter being the DLC, or, well, you could even call the sequel, Stronghold Crusader. Stronghold is a castle builder strategy game like no other, where you don't need any builders to build the buildings. It is a top-down camera angle, and to a certain extent, you could probably define Stronghold as a sim game, as you only manage buildings and not any of the workers. They work automatically. Stronghold was released in 2001 by Firefly Studios, and was released to high praise from critics and audiences alike. The game still has a cult following, and many know of its name and memes from it.
Infidel! Infidel!
There were also a few sequels. But we don't talk about those. There are 21 story missions for you to complete. The game takes place in a fictional version of England. Your father has just been betrayed.
Betrayal! What? Betrayal! Betrayed me!
And murdered by a conspiracy plot by the rat, the snake, the pig, and the big bad wolf. All while the king is imprisoned abroad. They have split the country into 4 different zones of control, where each member has their own zone of influence. As you can see, all the antagonists are named after animals and act as their counterparts. Rat mostly acts as a coward. Snake likes to betray people.
I feel certain we can come to a mutually beneficial arrangement.
Oh, spare me. I wanted only to be your ally. Really, I did.
Pig is a glutton, but he also loves to torture people.
I pull out teeth, cut off toes, break knees. Most fun I have for a long time.
And Wolf, he's a scary dude.
County, or I'll string you up.
You are assisted on your journey by Sir Longarm and Lord Woolsack, who give you assignments and tips on what to do. The story is basically just a revenge story, where you climb up the ranks as a low-ranked commander, you know, going from only leading a few units to you leading a whole army. I would not personally call the story great, but it's serviceable. But what steals the show is the voice acting.
Relax. By the time we return from our hunting trip, the problem will have resolved itself. Trust me.
You're mine now, so do as I say. All will pay a high tax and live a life of pain. It gave me pleasure to watch his anguish, and I will have that pleasure again watching yours. Step into my lair and get ready to meet your maker.
With the actors going all out in their performances akin to their roles as their animal they are portraying. They even go as far as to include the metallic noise and grunts in their portrayal.
Hold him off until I arrive.
You start the game by taking over different counties around the world map, which is displayed in an easy to understand manner, where you can see your territories and the different enemies' territories. You start with no counties, but slowly but steadily take over other counties, increasing your territory. Now, the mission structure is as follows. You get an assignment from Sir Longarm and Lord Woolsack, and you either site your keep anywhere on the map and build up your stronghold. Different objectives, which can either be a collection list, let's say you have to collect a certain amount of beer, stone or food, etc. Or it is to defend your castle with a timer, with the waves of enemies coming towards you in different time intervals. And you win by being able to defend against them and defeating the last army coming to you at the end of the timer. There are also missions where you are the attacker and siege other strongholds, and you either take them over to defend them or to later just kill your main enemies. You focus on the main antagonist one at a time, and in order of you focus on rat first, snake, pig, and lastly the wolf. When I replayed the game, many missions were repetitive, as you have to build and defend your castle until the timer runs out, which can be boring after some time when you have a vast army defending by the mid-game. It feels like you are just waiting for the timer to run out. Though this could be in terms of difficulty you choose. I tend to play on normal difficulty, which was a little bit too easy in some missions, but way too hard in some missions. And I can't even imagine people beating some of these missions on very hard. But yeah, like in general though, the game starts off relatively easy in the first few missions, you know, easing you into the process of how to build soldiers, how to gather resources, food, wood, stone, etc., and how to build your castle. But there's a steep difficulty curve, especially when you start attacking Pig's castle around the latter part of the game. I tend to lower the difficulty to finish these siege missions since they are just really hard, but they're also just quick, you know. You take over the castle, you kill the enemies, you win. You don't have to wait for a certain timer. But sometimes these missions just feel completely unfair, as you don't have enough forces to take over the castle. And especially when you siege the pig's castle and he has fire pitch all over the place and you have no idea it's going to happen.
You know what? This is bullshit. This is bullshit.
All in all, it will take you around somewhere 6 to 8 hours to complete the entire campaign. Gameplay. You start more or less every mission with building your castle and gathering resources, which is visually indicated on your stockpile next to your castle. You also need to gather food to maintain your popularity with your people. If it is above 50%, people will come to your castles, you know, you have more peasants, and you can build more buildings and they will go and work there. But if you go below 50%, they will start to leave your castle, which means many buildings will no longer work, which means you won't gain any resources at all and you will just be a sitting duck. And you will be left vulnerable until you can get above this 50% in popularity again. Overall, there are infinite resources on the map. The only limited ones are wild game and trees if you cut down all of them, but they slowly regrow if you leave some of them up. Stone, iron, pitch, weed, etc. are unlimited. And to buy units, you need to first build the buildings that provide the prerequisites. For example, if you want to build archers, you need to buy a Fletcher building, and then the Fletcher will get to work and he will take wood from the stockpile to create bows that are then put in the armory, and then you can build your units in exchange for a small amount of gold. Also then some buildings can build multiple weapons. Fletchers, for example, can build bows or crossbows, and a smith can build maces or swords, and you can manually change this depending on what kind of unit you are going after. When you hold the right mouse button key, you can change some settings that makes it easier to manage your castle and units. You can rotate the map 90 degrees to any direction, lower your walls to visually help you coordinate, and just lower all buildings and walls to the ground and you can see your and your opponent's soldiers, and it's just a good option when you are trying to build buildings in tight spaces in your castle. Some events occur during the campaign where your prop can suddenly wither,
Hop plants are overrun with hop weevil.
cows can die, or the worst, being invaded by rabbits. In some missions, the mission objectives can change, or rather they can be altered, especially during one of the missions where you are gathering ale for the snake in exchange for soldiers.
Storms this season. I am afraid I will need even more ale to raise money for the troops.
There are also wild animals lurking around, such as wolves, bears.
A bear is attacking our people.
The visuals and atmosphere in this game is quite beautiful and interesting to just watch and observe. You can follow bread, for example, being made from wheat in your fields, to flour in the mill, and into bread in the bakery and then turned into your granary, which is just cool to see. And you can see these animations inside the shops. It's just neat animations and it becomes almost like a sim game. The graphics in general, they have aged fairly well, but they are still pretty basic. But it's also the simplification that makes it easier to coordinate where you can build buildings, where the enemies are located, and that you have an overall considerable overview of your castle, making everything easy to access and control, and you never really feel lost. And this is kind of what they lost in the sequels. It just looks worse for some reason. I'm not sure exactly why. But it's just that some games just look better when they are basic, when they are trying to modernize it into the 3D overhaul, etc. It just doesn't work. Everyone in your population has names when you click on them, and it tells their status if they are going to work, if they have too much food, if they have too little food, taxes, etc. And if they are afraid when you're being attacked. And even the oxen have names. Now, when it comes to units in Stronghold, it features a wide array of units for the player to explore and build. Archers, the primary unit, they reload and shoot arrows fast with the ability to burn pitched ground. They are effective against units with low armor or health, but are ineffective against units with a lot of armor, like the swordsmen or pikemen. Spearmen, I tend to not build much spearmen, they just feel like cannon fodder. They're pretty much only good to dig or fill moats, and they can kick down ladders. But it's just not worth the hassle. Crossbowmen, on the other hand, are one of the most critical units in the game. They can kill almost anything fast. The negative aspect though is that they reload really slow compared to archers. Macemen. These guys are pretty much just crazy Scotsmen. Just running around. Hits like a truck, they're fast. The only downside is their medium armor and being expensive to train. They can also dig and fill moats just like the spearmen. Pikemen though. Pikeman is pretty much the unit the spearman wishes they could be. They can take a lot of damage, they deal heavy damage to buildings and walls, medium damage to other units, and they can also dig and fill moats just like spearmen. Swordsmen. These guys are cool. My cousin and I used to call them, let's see, in translation it would be something like bestest dudes, due to how cool they were and how good they were. They are walking tanks that can take almost any damage thrown at them, except for crossbow bolts and fire. The only downside is they are expensive to make and they are slow as hell. Horsemen, on the other hand, are pretty much tanks on horses. They are basically swordsmen on a horse. The downside is they can't climb up walls or stairways, so they can't really reach any archers up on the walls, so they feel unfortunately kinda useless in this game, where it's all about castles. There are also monks. They're an interesting class of units. They die fast, but they're cheap to make, and they can hit like a wall.
I kick ass for the Lord!
And you also build them from a cathedral. Engineers. They can build catapults, rams, siege towers, moving shields, and trebuchets. They're also tunnelers. Yeah, they pretty much dig tunnels and raise walls. It's a pretty cool unit. Taxes is your main income. You can demand your citizens to pay taxes. This will of course reduce your popularity, and you need to manage a fine line between gaining taxes and not getting the people to rebel against you and hate you. The music in Stronghold is just beautiful. I love the whole soundtrack, to the music, to the battle music. The music completely fits the time period with lutes, flutes and strings that could be played in a medieval festival, and no one would notice anything different about the music. However, when I played I had some issues with the different sound levels. The armor clanking just overpowered every other sound in different cutscenes, and it can just deafen you. Or clicking on a building will just destroy your eardrums. I don't know why this problem exists. I have all sound options down relatively low in the settings below 10%. There's also a ton of extra content in Stronghold for you to explore after the campaign. There is Siege and Invasion, an economic-based campaign where your objective are to collect a certain amount of resources rather than military might. There's also a map editor, and you can create your own map. The multiplayer, on the other hand, it's, it was through GameSpy. It's old, connect IP to other players, etc. It's hard to play multiplayer. The Siege and Invasion they feel kind of the same. I'm not sure why they have different menus to go into them. But more or less Siege is, you can either play as the defender or the attacker. And you have a huge castle to defend or a small castle, depending on the map you choose. Your only objective is to defend your castle, or if you're invading it, your mission is to just capture the castle. And these are fun. Some of them are really hard. And if you want to try some of them on very difficult, I mean, I admire you. Invasion is pretty much the same, but more with different fan-made maps, which are quite interesting to see, especially when you have some missions that reminds you of Battle of Helm's Deep. All in all though, Stronghold as a base game is great, and I can recommend it to anyone who is into strategy games and medieval fans alike. It's a true classic. Stronghold Crusader. If I had to choose between Stronghold or Stronghold Crusader, I would probably choose the latter. It adds a lot of content to the game, especially to the castle building and AI. You can now face off or play with 7 other factions on the same map, and it's just complete chaos. The game feels quite different compared to the first installment, primarily due to the speed. Everything just feels faster, from gathering resources, which means more armies. Units feels like they shoot, move and hit faster than before. Stronghold Crusader also masters the duality of attacking and defending, where you need to defend your castle often against multiple enemies and who will announce when they are going to attack you, or they just come in small skirmishes, but you also need to attack the enemy. And in this expansion, there have been several new units that has been added, and these are all more or less Arabian units, which are cool as hell. They work as mercenaries, so you don't need any prerequisites like weapons, bows, armors, maces to build them. You just need gold and peasants to buy these units. And you can quickly rush an opponents if you just spam buy assassins at the start and win a map easy. And these new units are as follows: slaves, assassins, horse archers, which are the most overpowered unit in the game. My god. Arabic swordsmen, Arabian archers, slingers, and flamethrowers. What is with these games and fire, man? Stronghold Crusader doesn't have a campaign per se, but it has different scenarios of the Crusade that you can follow. It's not as detailed as the original game story, but it's serviceable. You have, missions that you follow with the Crusade states against each other, Saladin's adventures, etc. It's neat, but it's not as good as the original. There are tons of new AI lords being added in Crusader, such as Saladin, the Caliph, the Sultan, Lionheart, Emperor Frederick I, King Philip I, the Wazir, the Emir, the Nizar, the Marshal, and the Abbot. The exciting thing about Stronghold Crusader is that every lord has a specific playstyle, both in terms of what units they build, how aggressive they are, how their economy is, and how they build their castles. So, for example, if you play against the Rat, yeah, that guy does not know how to build castles for shit.
What the fuck is this piece of shit?
Compared to the wolf, and oh my god, I wish I could build castles like him. They also include the fact that if you play against, let's say, 7 wolves, for example, all the wolves will have a different version of their castle, and they will act different in terms of aggression, which not just you copy-paste 7 of the AI lords and they will build and play exactly the same, which is just amazing. There's also the meat of the game, being the Crusader Trail. These consist of over 80 missions in total. They all start relatively easy, with you getting more money in the start against your AI foes, but this changes quickly later when you play solo against 3 caliphs. What is with this game and fire? And they all start with vastly more gold than you. And the most egregious example is Final Victory and the big one. These missions are pure insanity that only the shaddest of shads can finish.
We are victorious, sire.
All in all, Stronghold Crusader is a great addition to the game, and I highly recommend it for anyone who wants to play a game of pure insanity. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.
Weasel turd. What? Weasel turd.